Mystery Seekers, Episode 15. Mount Hermon, the mountain where heaven and earth collided. Welcome back, Mystery Seekers. There is a mountain in the Middle East connected to stories stretching back thousands of years. Ancient gods, giants, fallen angels, biblical kings, a mysterious cave associated with the underworld, the Messiah, ancient armies. And today, soldiers and United Nations peacekeepers stationed high on the mountain. This is Mount Hermon. Rising more than 9,000 feet above sea level, Mount Hermon dominates the landscape where modern Syria, Lebanon, and the Israeli-controlled Golan Heights meet. But to ancient people, this wasn't simply a mountain. It was sacred territory. A place where heaven and earth seemed to meet. And according to one of the most mysterious ancient Jewish texts ever written, something came down from the heavens here. Welcome to Mystery Seekers. Today we're exploring the mysteries of Mount Hermon. Our first mystery begins with an ancient text known as the Book of Enoch. Although the Book of Enoch isn't included in most modern biblical canons, portions of it were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, showing that the text circulated in the ancient Jewish world. And in chapter 6, the story becomes incredibly specific. A group of heavenly beings known as the Watchers look upon human women and decide to take them as wives. Their leader fears that the others might abandon the plan and leave him responsible for the rebellion. So they make an agreement, an oath. And the text gives us a location: Mount Hermon. According to 1st Enoch, there were 200 watchers. They descended upon the mountain and bound themselves together by an oath. What happens next becomes one of the most controversial stories in ancient religious literature. The Watchers take human wives. Their unions produce enormous offspring associated with the tradition of giants. And the Watchers begin teaching humanity knowledge they supposedly were not meant to possess: weapons, sorcery, astrology, and other forbidden arts. Eventually, according to Enoch, the corruption becomes catastrophic. But here's the Mystery Seeker's question: why Mount Hermon? Why would an ancient writer identify an actual mountain instead of simply saying these beings descended somewhere on Earth? Perhaps because Mount Hermon already had a reputation as sacred territory. And that reputation may be much older than the Book of Enoch. Long before today's borders existed, ancient civilizations knew Mount Hermon. Even the Bible preserves several names for it. The Sidonians called Hermon Sirion. The Amorites called it Senir. And another biblical name appears: Baal Hermon. That name is important. Baal was a major deity worshipped throughout the ancient Canaanite world. Archaeological remains throughout the Hermon region also show that ancient people established temples and sacred sites around the mountain. Imagine standing here thousands of years ago. Above the landscape rises an enormous mountain, its summit covered in snow, clouds surrounding its peaks, storms forming around it, water flowing down from its slopes. To an ancient civilization, a mountain like Hermon could appear to be the meeting point between heaven and earth, a cosmic mountain, a place where the human and spiritual worlds overlapped. And then another ancient story enters the mystery: the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh belongs to one of the oldest surviving literary traditions in human history. In the story, Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu journey to the legendary cedar forest. Guarding the forest is a terrifying being named Humbaba. The heroes eventually confront and kill him. One surviving version of the tradition contains a fascinating geographical reference connected with Sirion and Lebanon. Sirion is the ancient name associated with Mount Hermon. That doesn't prove that Gilgamesh traveled to Mount Hermon. The exact geographical identity of the cedar forest remains debated. But it shows something fascinating. The Hermon region existed within an ancient landscape filled with stories of supernatural beings, sacred mountains, and dangerous, forbidden territory. And the connections don't stop there. Because the Bible introduces another extraordinary figure from this same region, a king named Og. In Deuteronomy, the Israelites encounter Og, king of Bashan. Og isn't presented as just another ordinary king. He is described as one of the last survivors of the Rephaim, a mysterious ancient people associated in biblical tradition with unusually formidable inhabitants. The Bible even describes the enormous dimensions of Og's bed or funerary couch. His kingdom was Bashan, and Mount Hermon stood along this northern territory. After Moses' forces defeated Og, the region became connected with Israel's northern frontier. Joshua later describes conquered territory extending toward Mount Hermon. Now put these traditions beside each other. Hermon, Bashan, the Rephaim, traditions about giants. And then the Book of Enoch places the Watchers' descent on Mount Hermon and connects their rebellion with giant offspring. That doesn't prove these accounts describe the same event, but it reveals something fascinating about the ancient traditions surrounding this region. Again and again, the far north becomes associated with extraordinary beings, ancient powers, and supernatural stories. And near the base of Mount Hermon stands another mysterious location: Caesarea Philippi. At the foot of the Hermon region lies ancient Caesarea Philippi, today associated with Banias. Here you'll find something unusual: a massive rock face, ancient pagan shrines, and an enormous cave. The location became an important sanctuary associated with Pan, the Greek god of wilderness and wild places. Water historically emerged from the cave area, contributing to the headwaters of the Jordan River. Caves and deep openings in the earth also carried powerful supernatural associations throughout the ancient world. Now something extraordinary happens in the biblical account. The Messiah brings his disciples into the district of Caesarea Philippi. There he asks them, "Who do you say that I am?" Peter identifies him as the Messiah. Then comes the famous declaration that the gates of Hades will not prevail against his assembly. Think about the location. They're not in Jerusalem. They're standing in an area surrounded by pagan religious sites and beneath the enormous shadow of Mount Hermon. We cannot prove that the statement was specifically referencing the nearby cave, but the setting makes the passage even more intriguing. And then, shortly afterward, something else happens. Something that may bring the Messiah directly onto Mount Hermon itself. The Gospel accounts say the Messiah took Peter, James, and John onto a high mountain. There, something extraordinary occurred. His appearance changed. His face shone. His clothing became brilliantly white, and Moses and Elijah appeared. The event became known as the Transfiguration. But there's a mystery. The Gospel accounts never name the mountain. Christian tradition eventually identified Mount Tabor with the event, but another candidate exists: Mount Hermon. Why? Because immediately before the Transfiguration narrative, the Messiah and his disciples are in the region of Caesarea Philippi, and towering above that region is Mount Hermon. Hermon is also a genuinely massive mountain compared with Mount Tabor. If Mount Hermon was the location, the symbolism becomes extraordinary. The Book of Enoch describes rebellious heavenly beings descending upon Hermon. Then, centuries later, the Gospel narrative may place the Messiah on the same mountain region during a revelation of heavenly glory. One story describes rebellion descending. The other describes divine authority being revealed. We cannot prove Mount Hermon was the Mount of Transfiguration, but the possibility has fascinated biblical researchers for generations. And the mysteries of Mount Hermon aren't confined to ancient history. Because thousands of years later, armies would fight for this exact mountain. Mount Hermon's geography makes it extraordinarily valuable. Its tremendous elevation allows observers to see across huge areas of Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and the Golan Heights. That turned the ancient sacred mountain into a modern military prize. Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria during the 1967 Six-Day War. Then came the 1973 Arab-Israeli War. Mount Hermon became the scene of fierce fighting. Controlling the mountain meant controlling one of the most powerful observation points in the entire region. Its strategic importance became so great that Mount Hermon gained a modern reputation as the Eyes of the Middle East. But after the fighting, another organization arrived, and it remains connected with Mount Hermon today: the United Nations. This is one of the most surprising things about Mount Hermon. The United Nations maintains a presence on the mountain. Following the 1974 Agreement on Disengagement between Israel and Syria, the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force, known as UNDOF, was established to monitor the ceasefire and the area of separation. And Mount Hermon became one of the most extraordinary places in the entire UN peacekeeping system. High on the mountain sits a permanently staffed UN position. At approximately 2,814 meters, more than 9,200 feet above sea level, the United Nations identifies it as its highest permanently staffed position in the world. It has even been nicknamed the Hermon Hotel. But don't let the nickname fool you. Conditions can be extreme. Deep snow, freezing temperatures, difficult terrain. And beneath them lies one of the most politically sensitive regions on Earth. UN personnel stationed around Hermon help observe the area between Israeli and Syrian forces. Think about that for a moment. The same mountain that the Book of Enoch associates with 200 watchers, the same region connected with ancient temples, Og of Bashan, Caesarea Philippi, and possibly the Transfiguration, is now watched by the United Nations. Thousands of years later, Mount Hermon is still being used as a place to watch what happens below. But in December 2024, the situation changed dramatically again. Following the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria in December 2024, Israeli forces moved into additional strategic territory, including the Syrian side of Mount Hermon. The United Nations raised concerns about military activity inside the area established under the 1974 Disengagement Agreement. And the story hasn't ended. As of 2026, Mount Hermon remains part of the complicated security situation involving Syria, Israel, and the Golan Heights. Once again, nations are concerned about who controls the mountain. And when you look at Mount Hermon's history, an incredible pattern emerges. Ancient people considered it sacred territory. The Book of Enoch placed the descent of the Watchers here. Biblical kingdoms fought around it. Ancient traditions connected Sirion with legendary events. The Messiah traveled into the region beneath it. Some believe the Transfiguration occurred upon it. Modern armies fought for it. The United Nations established observation positions there. And today, Mount Hermon remains strategically important. Maybe that's the greatest mystery of Mount Hermon. Why this mountain? Why has the same location remained important for thousands of years? Was it simply geography? Its enormous height? Its water? Its position between civilizations? Its ability to overlook the surrounding lands? Or did ancient people believe there was something different about this place? To the writers of Enoch, Hermon was where heavenly rebellion touched earth. To ancient worshippers, its slopes were sacred. To biblical kingdoms, it marked a powerful northern frontier. To followers of the Messiah, the surrounding region became the setting for some of the most important declarations in the Gospel accounts. To modern militaries, controlling Hermon means controlling an extraordinary strategic viewpoint. And to the United Nations, its summit remains a place from which peacekeepers can observe one of the most sensitive borders in the world. Different civilizations, different empires, different generations, the same mountain. From the Watchers, to ancient kings, to the Messiah, to modern armies, to the United Nations, people are still watching Mount Hermon. And maybe the strangest part of the story is this. For thousands of years, humanity has changed. Empires have risen and disappeared. Borders have moved. Religions have spread across the world. But Mount Hermon is still exactly where it has always been, watching everything happen below. This is Mystery Seekers, and the next mystery might be closer than you think. Download the Mystery Seekers app and discover mysteries, treasures, and legends hiding in your own backyard. Available now on the Apple App Store.